What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 9 of Out of the Shadows. This episode is called The Truth About Positive Thinking. I'll be talking about positive thinking, my feelings about it, what I think could be improved upon as to what's being put out there. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about a concept that a friend of mine on Instagram talks about. It's called the useful mind. This person's name is Giorgio Grella. I can't recommend following him enough. You can find him on Instagram at Giorgio Grella. It's Giorgiogrella. I will mention his name in the description as well so you can find him more easily. Now, his concept of the useful mind, he talks about three things specifically. First, he talks about examining a negative thought and reframing it into a positive perspective. He also speaks about the need to experience your emotions and manage them, including negative emotions. Lastly, he talks about how to consciously work to change your thinking in order to rewire your brain to automatically go from negatively assessing a situation to assessing it in a more positive light. So the first concept, reframing from a negative thought to a positive thought. Now, an example of this would be something to the effect of, let's say, you're playing hockey, you love the sport, you play in a league, you lose a big game, and you think to yourself, oh my God, what a waste of time. I'm pathetic, I'm a loser, that was all for nothing. Clearly that's a very negative thought, it's a negative assessment of the situation. Alternatively, you could have thought to yourself, you know what, I gave it my all, I trained as hard as I possibly could, I left nothing behind, I lost this time, but you know what, we'll come back, we'll win next time. Now, both of these thoughts are your own personal assessment. Neither of them is true reality, which in many situations in life, we create the narrative. There isn't necessarily a truth to the way you ought to assess something. So these are both being your own personal interpretation of things. The difference is, in one, in which you tell yourself that you failed and you wasted your time, you're going to knock yourself down. You're going to discourage yourself. You might want to quit, you might not want to play anymore. There's going to be a negative impact, and it could be a long-lasting and deep negative impact. These things can start to bleed into other areas of your life. You start to consistently interpret things as negative. It's a bad downward spiral. You don't want to go there. Now, on the other end of it, if you interpret things in a positive light, as I said, I trained as hard as I could, I gave it my all, therefore I'm not going to beat myself up. I did everything that I could, and we're not the team whose hand is being raised. That's okay. If you gave it everything you had, you learned something, you come back, you'll be better next time. Now, in that scenario, you're going to retain your self-respect, your self-esteem. You're going to feel better about every aspect of the situation. Clearly, that's the way you want to go. If you interpret things constantly as negative, as I said, negative things are going to happen. If you can shift to a positive way of thinking, things are going to be more positive, clearly, as simplistic as that sounds. Now, it takes practice. This doesn't happen overnight, obviously. So, the next point that Giorgio makes is that we need to learn to experience our emotions and feel them fully, as well as validate them. And this includes negative emotions. Now, some people will title emotions negative, such as sadness, fear, anger, aggression, things of that nature. Realistically, I would say the more proper term is unpleasant emotions. No emotion in and of itself is negative. You're allowed to be sad, you're allowed to be angry, frustrated, things of that nature. That's normal, that's part of the human experience. And personally, I think it's awesome that Giorgio includes this, because there's far too many things out there, people who are deemed as being personal growth advocates, self-help advocates, even people in the psychology field. I feel there's this implication that there shouldn't be any negative emotions. And that's absurd. There's going to be emotions in life they're not positive. Nobody wants to be angry and frustrated or sad and depressed. They're, as I said, they're unpleasant. So I could see where you would deem those to be negative. Now, conversely, like I said, there will be things in life that are going to lead to that. If you lose a loved one, if you lose your job, if you have a loved one who needs to go through a major medical procedure, these are going to elicit feelings like fear, anger, sadness, frustration, helplessness. That's normal, of course. And you need to validate those feelings. If you don't validate and feel those feelings, it's going to lead to negative repercussions in the future. If you tell yourself, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, or feeling this way is wrong, or I'm thinking negatively, you're going to beat yourself up. You're going to likely experience some level of depression, or at the very least, sadness and anger towards yourself. If, on the other hand, you tell yourself, you know what, this makes sense. I had a really bad situation. I lost my job. This is tough. Of course I'm frustrated. Of course I'm angry. Of course I'm scared about the future. You know, what am I going to do because I don't have my income regularly anymore? That's a scary feeling. That's human. Now the thing is, we can't dwell on those emotions. You have to be able to move past them. Essentially, like I said, if we roll with the losing your job example, if you lose your job, yes, you may very well have the fear of, oh my God, I don't have regular income. How am I going to keep my house, my car? How am I going to support my family? How am I going to pay for my student loans? Whatever it is. And it's a valid fear to have. It's jumping to an extreme conclusion, but it's still a valid fear. On the other hand, if you tell yourself, all right, I lost this job, but you know what? I was never in love with it anyway, and I'll find something better. It's going to be hard, it'll take time, but I'll find another job, things will work out. It's going to be scary, but I'm going to do it. It's the same thing as I said earlier. They're both an interpretation. And yes, there can be negative repercussions, especially with something like that, where your income becomes limited, whether that's for a short period of time or a long period of time. But at the same time, you can't project that far and think of the absolute worst case scenarios of, you know, losing your apartment, house, car, being unable to support your family. Don't go there. Don't project that far ahead. Address what's in front of you. And again, if you're able to make that positive assessment, you're going to be much more apt to start taking positive steps faster, to start looking for another job, to start kind of formulating ideas as to what needs to be done, as opposed to being stuck in this very negative place and wanting to kind of dwell in the sadness and the frustration. The third and final point that is made in the useful mind concept is to consciously work to change your thinking on a daily basis so that your brain becomes trained or wired to automatically move towards a positive perspective or assessment. So what does that mean? Essentially, the more you're able to regularly recognize when you're assessing something in a more negative light and stop yourself and say, wait a minute, all right, I'm thinking negatively. What are the good things that can be extrapolated from this situation? What's a positive? And that doesn't mean to just, oh, well, you were thinking negative. No, think positively. You know, put it up against the test of logic. You know, if you're telling yourself, you just broke up with this girl, let's say you guys were together for 2 months. You're really upset, you're heartbroken, you had really high hopes, it seemed like things were going well, you felt a genuine connection. Now, of course, you're going to feel disappointed and let down, but if you go to the place of thinking, oh my God, this is how things always go, I'm no good with women or men or whatever your sexual orientation is, I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. I loved her so much. There's never going to be somebody like her. Natural responses again, but if you go there, you're going to go down. You're going to feel infinitely worse, and it's going to be much, much harder to bounce back from the situation. Now, conversely, if you can tell yourself, you know what, I'm upset. This is a loss. I'm going to feel sad about this for sure, but at the very least, it's better that this relationship ended here rather than down the line where we could have been married, we could have bought a house together, we may have even had children together. If you're in that position, it's a much more negative impact all around, especially if children are involved. Now you have little lives involved in the situation, and it's much greater. Again, that's kind of an extreme jump, I suppose, but at the same time, for the positive assessment to think in that light of, well, you know what, it's painful, but at least it happened now, as opposed to me being deeper into the situation. That's going to lessen the blow a bit. That's going to make you be like, all right, I'll be upset, but I can move on. This isn't the end of my world. And the whole point of this last one, the last point, saying to consciously change your thinking on a daily basis, the point of it is so that it becomes your natural reaction. It's your default to go towards the positive perspective, the positive interpretation. You get to this point suddenly where you're not reframing, you're not trying to flip from a negative to a positive, you just automatically go to the positive assessment. You work out, and for whatever reason, you can't do as many reps as you usually do, or you're running and you run, 3/4 of what you normally can. And instead of thinking negatively, you go straight to, you know what, it's an off day, tomorrow will be better. It is what it is. I still went, I still did what I needed to do. It's all good. You're at the point now where you've formed that habit. It's exactly where you go. You don't need to sit there and feel bad and be like, oh my God, I didn't do it. I'm not strong enough. Something's wrong with me. Maybe I gained weight. You don't have to go to that place and then try and turn it back and get to the negative place. You've trained your brain. You've rewired it to go to the positive assessment. And that's what a lot of retraining your brain is. It's a habit. And I don't mean that in a generic way of just like, oh, well, you do anything for X amount of days, it's a habit, now you're all good. No, it takes consistent practice. You need to be present with it mentally. You need to be working on it, feeling the feelings, going through the things on a genuinely invested level. If you go through the motions, it's not going to be worth much at all. It's not going to make a noticeable or long-lasting difference. So I'd like to close this episode with a quote from Bruce Lee. He said to absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and to add what is uniquely your own. He was referring specifically to his martial arts style, Jeet Kune Do. Now, a big part of Jeet Kune Do is the philosophy that you can take things from other styles and use them. There's no limitation. Take what works for you and use it. Now, this can be applied to any area of life, whether it's figuring out tactics for how to complete a project at work, what's most effective for you in that area, or really just overall generally, like what psychological tactics can I use to keep myself in a more positive mood, to keep myself thinking positively, feeling better, improving, things of that nature. So what are you doing? In order to do this, in order to do anything, you have to learn. You're not just born with information or the ability to do something. You have to learn how to do it. So in learning from your teachers, you take what you find to be useful from them, the stuff that you think is just unapplicable. Obviously, you don't retain it. And then you have to put on your own spin, your own way of being like, all right, well, I can use this, but the way that person does it isn't quite right for me. I think if I do it this way, it's a little bit better. And that's the way it should be. That's why in my first episode, I talked about how I'd rather be seen as a teacher as opposed to a life coach. I'm not a life coach. I don't have that certification, perhaps somewhere down the line. However, I prefer the term teacher in that you can take things, concepts, you can extrapolate your own meanings, and you can build upon them yourself. There isn't a specific way. You don't have to do it the way that I'm teaching it or someone else is teaching it. It becomes your own interpretation, your own personal style or blend, if you will. And I think that's really what life's about. Finding your own style, your own way of doing things. Find what's right for you. There's no such thing as the way or the right way. There's the right way for you. That's all there is. All right, guys. So as always, please like, share, subscribe. Leave me a comment. Any questions? Any feelings about this episode? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'd love to hear from all of you. So, all right, have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.